I first visited Thailand in 1987 and I've spent time here every year since then. The first 5 years or so that I came here, I was quite into photography. And for some reason I took slides, which were as kind of, they were inconvenient and a bit awkward at the time. But I'm really glad I took them now, because the tendency is with negatives and prints, people lose the negatives, or, the prints deteriorate or get lost. So luckily I've got this archive of pictures that I took between 1987 and 1992. And for quite a while now I've had this idea of putting them all on video and narrating them, and just giving my comments and memories and anything that comes to mind. One thing that crosses my mind before I get into the actual slides of the trip is just kind of like how much longer the process took of planning and booking a trip back then. I can remember just for booking the tickets, a friend of mine came down from Norfolk and he stayed at my house for the weekend, and we spent that whole weekend kind of manually looking through a magazine we used to have in England called The Exchange and Mart, and we had to phone up all these people, all these booking offices, and get quotes, and in the end, we got the best quote we could get. And then you had to phone it, and then we physically had to go on the train with the cash and collect the ticket and bring it back. I just kind of mention that now because now you can book for yourself and 4 of your mates in 10 minutes on an app on your phone. Just everything back then was such an adventure. And aside from even booking the ticket, it was just finding out anything about Thailand back then. There was no internet. There was no YouTube. These days people come to Thailand and quite often they're prepared, Quite often they come in and they actually know people who are here before they've even come here, just because they're watching YouTube or the internet. Well, we had none of that. There was a book called Southeast Asia on a Shoestring. And apart from that, if you were lucky, then a friend of a friend had been here and he might tell you a thing or two. So it was kind of like, it was all much more of an adventure. Anyway, we got the tickets booked, and we took the flight, and I'll get into the slides now and tell the stories behind them. Well, this picture was taken when the plane was coming down to land at Don Mueang Airport on the first trip. The outskirts of Bangkok were nowhere near as built up then as they are now, as you can see. This picture here was taken just as we'd left the plane. There were these armed policemen there. And it might have been the first time I'd seen armed policemen in my life. I just remember it looked a bit intimidating. It looked like a scene out of Midnight Express or something. My first memory after getting out of the airport is getting into the taxi to take us to the guest house. And I remember that we sat inside, and it was the first air-conditioned car I'd ever been in. So we sat in the car and I was hot. So as soon as we sat inside, I undid the window, and I remember my friend Adam saying to me, "No, Carl, this is air-conditioned. You're supposed to keep the window wound up." I can remember on the ride in the taxi, the taxi had to stop to let an elephant cross the road. It wasn't something that happened every day even then, but we didn't know that. We just thought, what is going on, My next memory is, for some reason, we got off at the Malaysia Hotel and walked down to the guest house. And I just remember the heat and humidity, and actually the smells. I thought it was a bit unpleasant, because in the hot and humid climate, smells tend to carry a bit. And I can remember walking down this Soi Si bump end and seeing a couple of mangy looking dogs, and just giving them a wide berth, just walking on the other side of the road. Now, in those days in Bangkok, there were 2 travellers areas. There was the Soi Si bump end, which was the original travellers area, but there was also the new one, which was Koh Samui. In those days, Koh Samui was just kind of like, it was just a backpackers area. Now it's very trendy with Thais, but in those days it wasn't. It was just kind of backpackers. And we stayed in what was regarded as sort of like, the naughty area, where all the bad boys stayed. This is a picture of the guest house we were staying in. It was called Freddy's Guest House 2, and it was taken on this little road called Soi Si Bump End, which was near the Malaysia Hotel. The Malaysia Hotel was quite famous because the year before it was used as a setting for parts of the movie Good Morning Vietnam. The first few nights at Freddie's Guest House 2, the three of us stayed in one room, and what they did was, like, I think normally the room was 70 baht a night, and they charged us 90 baht a night, 30 baht each, and we put a mattress down next to the double bed. And it was, you know, it was obviously a sort of kind of ridiculous situation, but I mean, that's the kind of budget we were on. My daily budget, I seem to recall I worked it out, was like 272 baht per day. And for that, you know, we had to pay for accommodation, food, drink, travel, absolutely anything. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money even then. I can remember on my first day in Bangkok just going for a walk. It was, all I remember was it was hot, you know, it was just so hot and humid, and I'd planned this walk on a book, you know, just using a map thinking that it was reasonable, but it was just, it was far too much to walk. You know, it's incredible the things that you found amazing, you know, things that I just take for granted now, like food stalls, you know, food carts. You know, I'd never seen anything like that, you know, and it's, you know, it's strange now thinking back what it was that caught my attention. Obviously the tuk-tuks seemed bizarre, and in those days there were just so many more of them, you know, just buzzing around everywhere. In fact, you know, that was the common mode of transport. You know, in those days the taxis weren't metered, and they were like a kind of a law unto themselves, and you know, unless you bargained very hard, it was hard to get a good deal. So everybody took the tuk-tuks, you know, the taxis were reserved for trips to and from the airport. I can remember the first night we went out to Patpong Road, you know, we were keen to sort of taste the nightlife, and it didn't work out well, you know, we made every mistake in the book. I remember we were in a little section between Patpong 1 and Patpong 2, and there's the guys who come up to all this sort of list of shows, ping pong shows and blowpipe shows, and you know, we ended up getting lured into one of these bars that we now know are kind of rip-off bars. And I remember we went upstairs, and you know, we were quite careful, you know, how much is it for a beer, because we didn't have much money, believe you me, we didn't have much money. And we went into this bar, and you know, we found it quite interesting in that. And we just had one beer each, and then we asked for the bill, and the bill had all kinds of extras added on, you know, like fees for some show, and I can remember just having an argument with them, and I think in the end they just sort of worked out that we just didn't have any money to take, you know, and we just ended up leaving for the price of a beers, you know. We just didn't have anything to give them. The next day at the guest house, you know, we were talking to a couple of guys who were there a long time, and we were saying that we'd had this bad experience in Patpong the night before, and I remember one of them called John, you know, he looked a bit of a dodgy geezer. I remember him saying, "Oh, you've got it wrong, you know, no, you've got it wrong." He said, you know, like come out with us, you know, we'll show you what it's all about. And that was really nice, actually, because we went out with them, and we had a great time. This picture was taken in Goldfinger, and you know, we were kind of mesmerised by this lady called Oi. Do you know, it amazes me, I can still remember their names, you know, just somebody I met in a go-go bar. But yeah, I mean, that night was fun, you know, it was a total contrast, because we were with people who kind of knew their way around, and that it was a total opposite to the night before. Sometimes people ask me about the cost of a night out in the go-go bars back in 1987. You know, it was a long time ago, and I can't remember that much. What I do remember is that there were only 2 beers available in the go-go bars. One was Singer beer, and the other one was a German beer called Kloster. And that remained the case until the early 90s. There was another beer called Amaret, but you know, they never sold it. You know, you could never find it anywhere. I seem to recall the cost of the beers was about 35 baht in the go-go bars, and of course everything was a lot cheaper. I remember that the fare from where we used to stay on just off of Rama 4 to Patpong on a tuk-tuk was 15 baht. I can remember that. And another thing I do remember about the go-go's is that in those days 500 baht used to last a long time. I remember in those days it was no problem at all to take photographs in the go-go bars. You know, you could just do it quite openly. I guess people, you know, didn't feel so vulnerable because, you know, there wasn't an internet. Yeah, this was on the train going up to Chiang Mai, and I just remember, you know, it was, yeah, I mean, it is a long train journey, but I just a couple of things I remember from it. One was we didn't know anything about sleepers, so I think we got like second-class seats, and we, you know, they were all right. They weren't bad, but we didn't really sleep all night. And I just remember that we got stuck somewhere. I can't remember why, but we were delayed for 5 hours. And I remember that we just, you know, we got off the train and it was the middle of the night, and we were just on this kind of empty train platform. I think a couple of vendors turned up, and we, you know, we had something to eat and drink, but it wasn't very pleasant. But it did mean one advantage of it was that a lot of the journey that we would have covered at night, the next day we actually covered in the daytime. You know, quite scenic bit when you're going through the mountains. And yeah, I remember a few things. I remember like just seeing paddy fields for the first time, you know, and just taking these pictures. I won't bore you with them, you know, but just taking these pictures of paddy fields, because like back then even like a paddy field seemed incredible, you know. But it was a long journey. It was a long journey. And this is us just after we'd arrived after our kind of mega journey at Chiang Mai station, and we, you know, we thought, oh, we'd have our picture taken by the sign. This is in the back of a pickup truck taking us to the guest house. We went to a place called Narrate House, which was not far from the Taipei Gate, and it was kind of like a 5 or 6 story guest house place with a big restaurant underneath. Actually, you know, thinking back, it wasn't bad actually. It was pretty good value for money. It was quite a nice place. That night in Chiang Mai, we looked for a bar, and we found this bar called Lovebirds Bar, which was near the Taipei Gate. I mean, it's long gone. I don't think it made it past the 80s, but I remember we went in there, and myself and Adam met a couple of girls, and they said, well, look, you know, like, we'll take you out tomorrow, you know, we'll go visiting. So we hired motorbikes. Now, I had never ridden a motorcycle in my life. And I just remember Adam saying, oh, I'll show you. And I can remember we went to Pop Rental, which is still there. It's still there to this day, Pop Rental. And we went there, and I remember saying to the guy who had the motorcycle, I remember saying, do you have insurance? And he said, no crash, no problem. And I thought, he's got a point. Anyway, somehow, you know, I managed to get it together, and I remember like going up Doi Sutet, which is like a windy road, and thinking back, you know, we were crazy, you know, we were racing along those curves. I mean, I wouldn't do it today. It was the first time that I'd ever ridden a motorcycle. I seem to recall on the way back, a set of lights, you know, like revving it up and coming off, you know, the front end went up, and, you know, we weren't hurt, but I just remember all these people kind of like pointing us, sort of saying, you've crashed, and okay, yeah, I've crashed, thanks for telling me, you know. I remember as we were going up the mountain, there were soldiers everywhere, and one of these soldiers suddenly signalled for us to kind of pull over, so we pulled over and we got off the bikes, and one of the girls was talking to him. She said, oh, the king's coming. So they got us to stand off this bike, and there's a royal palace a few kilometres just beyond Doi Sutet Temple. And the king was going up there, and this big parade of cars, you know, this big convoy of cars came by. So so we saw the king, you know, on the first ever trip up Doi Sutet. And I remember we enjoyed the ride so much that we went back there the next day, and exactly the same thing happened. You know, we saw the King of Thailand twice on our first 2 days in Chiang Mai. This is just there's a viewpoint. You know, it was a lot more basic then than it is now, but it's just a viewpoint on the way up Doi Sutet. This is me actually at Doi Sutet Temple. At there's a wall there where it's got a really kind of like nice view back over Chiang Mai out to the airport. And these are the 2 ladies that took us up to Doi Sutet. The one on the left was called Noi, and the one on the right was called Sunny. Yeah? Don't ask me how I remember that. I remember on the second day we went up past Doi Suthep and went up beyond Doi Pui, and we were just following some of the dirt roads, and it was absolutely spectacular. Well, it still is up there, and a lot more of the road is paved these days, so you know it's a lot easier going if you're riding a bike. At some point we went on one of these organised treks, you know, that was the big thing back then, you know, going trekking and hill tribe trekking, and I remember we did this section on these rafts. And these rafts are like, they weren't very good, they were sinking, but there were these great big spiders that were on the rafts, and you couldn't get rid of them, you know, you try to chase them off and they'd sort of like, they'd duck down underneath the raft, and then a minute later they'd show up again, you know, they were horrible. I can't remember whether this picture was taken in Chiang Mai or in Bangkok, but it was on the journey back, on the train journey back from Chiang Mai. Now, the place I was really looking forward to going to was Koh Samui, because, you know, I'd just been told about this kind of tropical paradise like Robinson Crusoe place where you could stay on beach bungalows for 40 baht a night, you know, and I was just like mesmerised by this thought. You know, I was somebody, I'd never seen a palm tree before I went to Thailand, so, you know, the idea just blew me away. Now, of course, I remember that we had a train journey down there, and I think we were having to budget, and we bought third-class tickets, you know, and the seats were so uncomfortable. And I just remember like trying to lay down on the floor, you know, like there weren't a lot of people in third class, and it was a long journey. And we were laying down on the floor, and I tried to sort of like, I could stretch my body under one of these seats. And I just remember like getting my head under one of the seats and putting it, I had like a roll mat, and I put that down, I got my head under it, but I couldn't put my head straight up. I had to sleep with it. I had to have my head at the side like this, you know. I was trying to sleep like that, laying flat on the floor with my head down, you know. It didn't work. It was a sleepless night, but you know, like we eventually arrived at Surat Thani. We got the bus to the ferry and took the ferry ride over. When we arrived on Samui, just couldn't believe it, you know, just blew us away.